The Philadelphia Experiment. A medical report. In the early 1940s, the United States Navy embarked on a top-secret project that sought to revolutionize naval warfare. This ambitious initiative, known colloquially as the Philadelphia Experiment, aimed to render naval vessels invisible to enemy radar and detection through the manipulation of electromagnetic fields. The theoretical foundation was that by enveloping a ship in a powerful electromagnetic field, it would be possible to bend light and radar waves around the vessel, rendering it undetectable. On October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer escort, was selected for a high-stakes test of this technology at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The ship was equipped with an array of generators and coils designed to create a robust electromagnetic field. The crew, mostly unaware of the true nature of the experiment, was subjected to this revolutionary yet untested technology. The experiment began at approximately 9 a.m. Witnesses reported a peculiar greenish-blue glow enveloping the ship, followed by its sudden disappearance from view. The aftermath of the experiment revealed disastrous results, with numerous crew members exhibiting severe and inexplicable injuries. In the aftermath of the war, in 1948, a distressing incident occurred involving the leakage of classified information related to the Philadelphia experiment. Dr. Samuel Reynolds, the chief medical officer who had meticulously documented the aftermath of the experiment, was deeply troubled by the suffering and loss experienced by the crew member and decided to share the report with a journalist. The leaked report created a media stir, with journalists eager to uncover the truth behind the mysterious experiment. However, the U.S. government intervened swiftly, invoking national security concerns. The report was deemed highly sensitive, and the government acted to prevent its publication. Authorities argued that the disclosure of such information could compromise ongoing national security measures and expose classified technology that was still under development. Journalists and reporters were pressured into silence, and the report was subsequently buried under layers of red tape and secrecy. The decision to suppress the report was justified by the need to protect both the safety of the remaining experimental technology and the integrity of national defense operations. However, some years ago the report showed up again on a hacker forum in the darknet and contained details about the medical evaluations and treatments provided to the affected personnel. Medical evaluation and treatment. Ensign James Hartford was among the most severely affected. He was found with a partial fusion of his right forearm and thigh with the ship's hull. His injuries included severe burns and lacerations around the fusion sites. Upon retrieval, Ensign Hartford was unconscious and displayed signs of shock and significant fluid loss. The process of freeing Ensign Hartford from the ship's hull was both harrowing and complex. Specialized teams, equipped with cutting-edge tools of the time, had to carefully cut away the metallic sections of the ship that had fused with his limbs. This required precision to avoid causing further injury. The team used a combination of torches and manual tools to separate the fused metal from his body, all while being mindful of the intense heat generated by the cutting process. Despite their efforts, the procedure was fraught with difficulties, and Hartford's condition deteriorated rapidly during the extraction. Radiographic imaging revealed that metallic structures were interwoven with both bone and soft tissue. His blood tests indicated elevated stress hormone levels and unusual electrical activity in the surrounding tissues. Despite the surgical team's best efforts to remove the foreign material from his body while attempting to preserve limb function, the extent of the fusion had caused irreparable damage. Ensign Hartford was stabilized with intravenous fluids and blood transfusions, and broad-spectrum antibiotics were administered to prevent infection. Despite these interventions, his condition continued to worsen. Ensign Hartford regained consciousness briefly after the surgery, but soon succumbed to his injuries. He passed away shortly after being freed from the ship's hull. His death was attributed to severe systemic shock and the extensive damage inflicted upon his body by the fusion process. Lieutenant Samuel Davis presented with even more critical injuries. He was found fused with the deck plating at his lower back and left leg, with severe hemorrhaging and extensive tissue damage. He was semi-conscious and unable to speak coherently. Diagnostic procedures, including X-rays, revealed that his spinal cord was partially fused with metallic elements, resulting in neurological deficits below the fusion site. blood tests showed significant metabolic imbalances and acidosis. Treatment for Lieutenant Davis involved stabilizing his spinal column through partial detachment of the metallic components and providing aggressive wound care to prevent necrosis. He also required respiratory support due to compromised lung function resulting from fusion with the rib cage. Despite these efforts, Lieutenant Davis remained in critical condition. Over the following days, his health continued to deteriorate. Although initial treatment stabilized some of his immediate symptoms, he experienced persistent infections and worsening neurological complications. Despite intensive medical care, Lieutenant Davis's condition proved unmanageable. He succumbed to his injuries several days after the experiment, his death resulting from multiple organ failure and severe systemic infection. His prolonged suffering underscored the devastating impact of the experiment's failures. Petty Officer 3rd Class Robert Jenkins suffered from less severe but still significant injuries. His fingers were superficially fused with a metallic railing, accompanied by multiple contusions and abrasions across his torso and limbs. Unlike the more critically injured personnel, Petty Officer Jenkins was fully conscious but exhibited severe anxiety and confusion. X-rays confirmed that his injuries were confined to soft tissues, sparing major blood vessels and bones. Psychological evaluation revealed signs of acute stress disorder and hallucinations. The treatment for Petty Officer Jenkins included the surgical separation of the fused digits under local anesthesia. Psychological support and sedatives were administered to manage his anxiety. He was placed under observation for potential delayed onset of deeper tissue damage. Petty Officer Jenkins showed signs of physical recovery but continued to require psychological support and rehabilitation. A further tragic case involved crew member Thomas Weller. Weller was found with his body fused to a metal security door on the lower decks of the USS Eldridge. The door, which had fused with the top of Weller's head, created a horrific scene of amalgamation between metal and flesh. The extraction process was particularly grueling. It involved carefully cutting through the fused metal and delicately detaching it from his head and body. Despite the painstaking efforts to free him, crew member Weller was declared dead upon discovery. The extent of his injuries was such that the fusion with the door had resulted in catastrophic damage to vital structures, including his cranial and upper spinal regions. The physical trauma, combined with severe shock and systemic failure, rendered any attempts at resuscitation futile. Another severe case involved crew member John McCormick, whose legs were fused with the metal flooring in a horrifying manner. The fusion was so intense that his legs were visibly protruding from the ceiling of the lower deck. McCormick was found in a state of extreme distress, fully conscious and screaming in agony. His legs had become interwoven with the metal flooring, creating a grotesque and painful amalgamation. The metal had penetrated deeply into the tissues of his legs, causing significant damage to both muscle and bone. When the medical team arrived, McCormick was in a state of shock and severe pain. He pleaded with the medical personnel to end his suffering, his voice filled with despair and desperation. The team administered a series of powerful sedatives and analgesics to calm him down and manage his excruciating pain. These drugs were used to induce a state of semi-consciousness, making it possible to proceed with the necessary surgical intervention. The amputation procedure was complex and carried out under extreme conditions. The team had to carefully detach the fused metal from McCormick's legs, ensuring that they did not exacerbate the damage. The metal had penetrated the bone structure, and the fusion had caused a macabre display where McCormick's legs were visibly integrated into the metal flooring. The surgical team used a combination of cutting tools and cauterization techniques to minimize bleeding and ensure the removal of the fused metal while preserving as much of the remaining healthy tissue as possible. Despite the meticulous nature of the procedure, the extent of the fusion resulted in the need for amputation above the knees. The operation was performed with as much precision as possible, but the severe trauma had already caused irreparable damage. Following the amputation, McCormick was stabilized with intravenous fluids, blood transfusions, and continued pain management. However, the trauma and the extent of his injuries left him in a critical state. John McCormick's condition remained unstable, and despite the efforts to save him, he succumbed to complications related to his injuries and the surgery. The combination of severe trauma, shock, and subsequent infections proved too great for his body to overcome. Inescapable tragedies. Several crew members were found in such a state of fusion with the ship's structure that immediate medical intervention was impossible. These cases were characterized by grotesque amalgamations where the metal had fused with both skin and bone, creating horrific scenes that were nearly impossible to untangle. One particularly disturbing instance involved crew member Henry Foster, whose entire torso was fused with a section of the ship's bulkhead. His body had melded into the metal, with his arms and legs protruding in unnatural angles. The fusion was so complete that his skin had been stretched and distorted, creating a ghastly tableau of suffering. His face, partially visible, bore an expression of agony frozen in time. The medical first responders could not assist Foster due to the extreme nature of his injuries. The metal had penetrated deeply into his vital organs, and the immediate environment was too dangerous to conduct any meaningful intervention. The horrific visual evidence of his condition led to his being classified as beyond recovery. Another case involved crew member Michael O'Reilly, who was found with his entire body fused into a series of metal supports within the lower engine room. His limbs were intertwined with the metal, rendering any form of medical intervention futile. The horrific sight of O'Reilly, who appeared to be both suspended and embedded in the ship's structure, was a stark reminder of the experiment's catastrophic failure. Additional observations. Several other crew members displayed a range of troubling symptoms. Common among them were disorientation, short-term memory loss, visual and auditory hallucinations, and episodes of intense, unexplained pain. These symptoms suggest that prolonged exposure to the intense electromagnetic fields during the experiment had significant effects on both physical and mental health. Conclusion. The medical consequences of the Philadelphia experiment were severe and multifaceted. The immediate priority must be to understand the underlying mechanisms behind these injuries and to develop preventive measures for future experiments. The unique nature of the injuries sustained, coupled with the profound psychological impact on the crew, underscores the need for a classified and cautious approach to both treatment and documentation.